The Deathworlders' confidence. 5 to 7 minute hook. The Deathworlders were known across the galaxy for their unmatched strength and ruthless nature. They were the ultimate warriors, and no one dared to challenge their dominance. Their fleet was a terrifying sight. Massive ships that glided through space like predators hunting their prey. Each planet they encountered fell to their might. Each species they faced was crushed without mercy. No one survived when the Deathworlders came to conquer. On their homeworld, a planet as brutal and unforgiving as the warriors themselves, the Deathworlders believed they were unbeatable. For generations, they had trained in their harsh environment, perfecting their combat skills. The air itself was toxic to most species, the soil was harsh and unyielding, and the wildlife was vicious, capable of tearing an unprepared creature apart in minutes. Only the strongest could survive here, and the Deathworlders had survived and thrived. They were a living testament to the strength that came from enduring the harshest conditions. The leader of the Deathworlder fleet, Commander Vor, was the embodiment of their power. Tall, broad, and covered in scars from battles long past, he looked every bit the part of a warlord. His cold, calculating eyes had seen countless victories, and his reputation alone made other species tremble. When he spoke, his words were law, and his decisions were final. No one dared question him, for those who did no longer lived to tell the tale. His fleet, composed of hundreds of warships, was the most advanced in the galaxy. Each ship was equipped with powerful weapons and shields that could annihilate entire civilizations with a single strike. The Deathworlders had destroyed entire worlds, leaving nothing but burning debris in their wake. And they did it without breaking a sweat. Conquering planets, wiping out resistance, and expanding their empire was as natural to them as breathing. One day, while Commander Vor sat in his war room, staring out into the vastness of space, his communications officer approached him with urgent news. A message had been intercepted. It was from an unknown species, one that had never been encountered by the Deathworlders before. The message was a distress signal, sent from a planet in the far reaches of the galaxy. The distress was not from any of the typical species the Deathworlders had dealt with, but from an entirely new kind of threat. The message was desperate, filled with fear, and it begged for help. Commander Vor listened to the message, his mind racing. It was clear that the species sending the signal was in trouble, but the question remained, why would anyone ask for help from the Deathworlders? They were known to be merciless, brutal, and destructive. No one would ever think to turn to them for aid. We're the most feared warriors in the galaxy, Vor thought to himself, a smirk curling on his lips. What could possibly be so powerful that they would seek us out? His curiosity piqued. Commander Vor decided to investigate. He ordered the fleet to change course and head toward the source of the distress signal. The journey would take days, but Vor was eager to find out what this mysterious species was hiding. It was a rare occurrence for anyone to be bold enough to contact the Deathworlders, and the idea of encountering a new challenge stirred something within him. The Deathworlders, after all, had never met their match. They had crushed every enemy in their path. Even the most advanced and powerful civilizations had fallen before their might. There was no species that could stand against them, no force that could challenge their supremacy. So what could be so powerful that it would make these aliens beg for their help? As the fleet traveled toward the unknown planet, the mood aboard the ships was one of excitement. The crew members spoke of the mystery they were about to uncover, each one believing that whatever they found would only add to the Deathworlders' growing legend. They were the greatest warriors in the galaxy, and nothing could defeat them. The challenge, whatever it was, would simply be another opportunity for them to prove their superiority. Meanwhile, Commander Vor stood at the front of his ship, watching the stars zoom by as they traveled toward the unknown. He was eager, not just for the challenge, but for the chance to show these unknown aliens just how futile it was to call for help from the Deathworlders. They would soon learn that no one was stronger than them. But as the fleet drew closer to the planet, a strange feeling began to gnaw at Vor's gut. For the first time, He felt something he hadn't felt in years. Doubt. Could there truly be something out there that could make the Deathworlders pause? Was this new species somehow different from the others? The idea of an enemy that could challenge them made Vor uneasy, but he quickly pushed the feeling aside. The Deathworlders were strong. They were invincible. Nothing could stand in their way. As the ships entered the planet's atmosphere, the anticipation was palpable. The crew knew they were about to confront something new, something unknown. They expected a quick, easy victory, as always. But deep down, Commander Vor knew that this mission was different, and whether he wanted to admit it or not, he feared that it would test everything the Deathworlders had ever believed about their own strength. The fleet descended toward the planet's surface, the hum of the ship's engines filling the air. They were about to land, and Commander Vor knew that soon they would learn just what kind of species had the audacity to call upon the Deathworlders. And for the first time in his life, he wondered if this encounter would be more than just another easy victory. The unknown threat. As the Deathworlder fleet descended toward the planet, Commander Vor's thoughts raced. He was eager to show these unknown aliens the power of the Deathworlders, but the unease that had begun to creep into his mind couldn't be easily shaken off. For the first time in a long while, he found himself questioning the easy victories that had always come so naturally. Could there really be a challenge here that would make even the Deathworlders break a sweat? The ships landed with a thunderous roar, sending dust and debris into the air. The crew quickly disembarked, weapons drawn and eyes scanning the surroundings. The planet's atmosphere was thick with mist, the air heavy and humid, unlike anything the Deathworlders had experienced before. They were used to harsh environments, but this one felt different, almost as if it were alive. Commander Vor stood at the front of his unit, his every step measured and purposeful. His mind remained focused on the mission. We will find this species, and we will show them why they should never have called us for help, he muttered under his breath. The ground was covered in a strange, glowing vegetation that pulsed softly with light, casting an eerie glow across the landscape. The sky was an unnatural shade of red, swirling like it was caught in the grasp of a violent storm. The entire atmosphere felt foreign, unsettling. The Deathworlders had conquered countless worlds, but this one was different, and they could feel it in their bones. As the fleet moved forward, they encountered the first sign of life. Strange, towering structures, half buried in the ground. These structures appeared ancient, covered in layers of dust and vines. They seemed to be the remnants of an ancient civilization, one that had once thrived on the planet, but now lay in ruin. But what caught the Deathworlders' attention was the fact that these structures were still intact, almost as if they were protecting something. "Stay alert," Vor commanded, his voice low but filled with authority. "Something is not right here." The soldiers moved carefully, their weapons ready, eyes scanning every movement, every shadow. Their training was instinctual, and even the slightest noise could send them into combat mode. As they moved deeper into the strange landscape, a strange sound echoed through the air. It wasn't the usual growl of a beast or the sound of a hostile enemy approaching. It was a hum, a deep, resonating hum that seemed to be coming from the very ground beneath their feet. The hum grew louder with each passing step, and then, suddenly, the ground trembled. The Deathworlders froze, unsure of what was happening. The hum turned into a deep, rumbling roar, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with power. "What in the galaxy is that?" one of the soldiers whispered, his voice laced with fear. Commander Vor clenched his fist, trying to maintain his composure. "Stay calm," he ordered, but his own confidence was starting to waver. He had faced many threats before, but nothing had ever felt like this. The tremor in the ground intensified, and the mist in the air seemed to swirl around them, as if it were alive, forming shapes that flickered in and out of existence. The structures around them began to glow with an eerie light, and suddenly, from the depths of the ground, strange creatures began to rise. At first, they appeared to be nothing more than shadows, flickering in the mist, But as they emerged from the ground, the Deathworlders saw them in full. The creatures were tall, humanoid but not quite human. Their bodies seemed to shimmer and shift, their features impossible to make out fully. Their eyes glowed with an unsettling, unnatural light, and their presence seemed to make the air grow colder. Vor's heart skipped a beat. These beings were not like anything the Deathworlders had faced before. The confidence that had once radiated from them began to fade, replaced with a growing sense of unease. For the first time, the Deathworlders were faced with a force that they couldn't easily identify or defeat. "What are they?" one of the soldiers asked, his voice trembling as he gazed at the glowing creatures. "I don't know," Vor replied, his voice tense. "But they're not like anything we've seen." The creatures stood in silence, their glowing eyes fixed on the Deathworlders. They didn't move, didn't speak, but their presence was more than enough to send a wave of unease through the soldiers. The Deathworlders had conquered entire civilizations, wiped out species with ease, but these creatures, they were a mystery, something the Deathworlders couldn't immediately understand. The commander took a step forward, trying to maintain the image of a leader who wasn't afraid. "Who are you?" he called out, his voice strong. "Why did you call us here?" The creatures remained silent, their eyes still fixed on the Deathworlders, until one of them stepped forward. It was taller than the others, its glowing eyes piercing through the mist like twin stars. Slowly, it raised its arm, and as it did, the ground beneath the Deathworlders' feet began to tremble once again. Suddenly, a voice echoed in their minds, clear and cold. "We did not call you here for help, Deathworlders." The words sent a shiver down Vor's spine. He knew these creatures were no ordinary beings. They were not afraid of the Deathworlders. They were in control. And now, the Deathworlders found themselves faced with an enemy who had more power, more mystery, and more authority than they could ever have imagined. Before Commander Vor could react, the mist thickened, and the creatures vanished into the shadows, leaving the Deathworlders standing on the planet's surface, shaken and uncertain. This was no ordinary mission. The challenge that lay ahead was beyond anything they had faced before, and Commander Vor was beginning to realize that the Deathworlders' confidence might not be enough to overcome this threat. The unseen power. The Deathworlders stood in stunned silence, their weapons still raised, but their confidence shaken. The mist had thickened, and the glowing creatures had vanished into the shadows, leaving nothing behind but the eerie hum that seemed to reverberate in their bones. The air was heavy with an unnatural chill, and the ground beneath them felt like it was pulsing, as if alive. Commander Vor, still on edge, scanned the horizon, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He was a seasoned leader, a warrior who had seen countless battles, but nothing like this. These creatures, these beings, were unlike anything he had encountered before. They didn't move like animals, and they didn't act like warriors. There was something deeper at play here, something that the Deathworlders couldn't simply overpower with brute force. "What are they?" one of the soldiers asked, his voice barely a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might invite another attack. Vor took a deep breath and forced himself to focus. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but we're not here to play games. We need to find out what's going on, and we need to do it quickly." The soldiers exchanged nervous glances, but they trusted their commander. They had faced countless dangers together, and they had never faltered. But this was different. They were walking into the unknown, and for the first time, they were uncertain of their own power. "Stay alert," Vor ordered, his voice steady despite the fear creeping into his chest. "Move out, we'll continue the search." The group began to move forward again, their footsteps heavy and slow, the air thick with tension. The strange, pulsing vegetation seemed to move with them, as though it were watching their every move. Every shadow seemed to hide something, and every breeze carried the sense of being followed. As they ventured deeper into the alien world, they encountered more of the strange structures, tall, looming spires that seemed to rise out of the earth, like the bones of some ancient, forgotten creature. Some of these structures were cracked and broken, while others remained intact, their surfaces covered in intricate symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. "Do you think they made these?" one of the soldiers asked, gesturing to the towering spires. Vor didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer to one of the structures, examining the symbols carved into its surface. There was something ancient about them, something that spoke of a lost civilization, one far older and more powerful than anything the Deathworlders had encountered. His instincts told him that these creatures, whatever they were, had something to do with these ruins. Before he could speak, the ground trembled again. But this time, it wasn't a small quake. The entire landscape shook, the structures around them creaking as though they were about to collapse. The Deathworlders braced themselves, weapons aimed at the shifting earth beneath them. And then, the mist began to part. From the depths of the swirling fog, a massive shape emerged, a towering figure, its glowing eyes fixed on the Deathworlders. This one was different from the others. It was larger, its form more defined, and its presence was overwhelming. It seemed to radiate power, the very air around it crackling with energy. The Deathworlders froze, their weapons raised, but they didn't dare to fire. This creature was something else entirely. Its eyes glowed with a deep, intense light, and it moved with a fluid grace that was almost hypnotic. Vor's heart raced as the creature stepped forward, the ground beneath its feet glowing with every movement. It raised one hand, and the mist seemed to part in response, swirling away as though obeying its command. "Who are you?" Vor demanded, trying to steady his voice, but it trembled despite his efforts. "What do you want from us?" The creature did not answer immediately. Instead, it regarded the Deathworlders with a silent, calculating gaze, as though measuring them. The tension was unbearable, each moment stretching on like an eternity. Finally, the creature spoke, but not with words. Its voice was inside their minds, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to reverberate through their very bones. "You are not welcome here, Deathworlders." The words sent a shock through Vor and the others. This was no mere warning. It was a statement of power, one that threatened to unravel everything they had ever believed. "We are the guardians of this world," the creature continued, its voice cold and unfathomable. "And you are not the ones who are meant to claim it." For a moment, Vor's mind raced. Guardians? What kind of creatures were these to claim guardianship over an entire world? And why had they chosen this moment to reveal themselves? The creature's eyes narrowed, as if sensing the thoughts running through Vor's mind. "You are not the first to think you are superior," it said, its tone now tinged with something that almost sounded like pity. "But you are not prepared for what lies ahead." Before Vor could respond, the creature vanished into the mist, leaving only a lingering sense of dread in its wake. The Deathworlders stood motionless, their weapons still raised, but their confidence shattered. What had they just witnessed? And what were these creatures that seemed to command the very elements themselves? For the first time, the Deathworlders felt something they hadn't felt in years. Fear. The Guardian's warning. The Deathworlders were shaken. For the first time in their hardened lives, they faced something that couldn't be solved with brute strength or strategy. The mist seemed heavier now, as though it bore the weight of the mysterious Guardian's warning. Commander Vor clenched his fists, his mind racing as he replayed the words the creature had spoken in their minds. "We are not welcome here," Vor muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, waiting for their commander to regain his composure. One of the younger soldiers, Rix, couldn't hold back any longer. "Commander," he said, his voice trembling, "what do we do? That thing, whatever it was, it knew we were coming. It was waiting for us." Vor turned to him, his face stern but unreadable. "We don't panic," he said firmly. "We're Deathworlders. We don't back down from anything." But even as he spoke the words, doubt gnawed at him. The spire nearest to them, began to emit a low, resonating hum, drawing their attention. The symbols carved into its surface glowed brighter, shifting patterns as if they were alive. The eerie light reflected off their armor, casting long, distorted shadows across the ground. "Sir, the structure," one of the soldiers began, but a sudden, sharp sound cut him off. It was a high-pitched whine, rising in intensity. Before anyone could react, a beam of light erupted from the top of the spire, shooting straight into the sky. The ground shook violently, and the air was filled with the smell of ozone. "Scatter!" Vor shouted, his instincts taking over. The soldiers dove for cover, rolling behind rocks and fallen debris as the light grew brighter. The beam disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind an ominous silence. "What was that?" Rix asked, his voice muffled from behind the rock he was crouching behind. "I don't know," Vor admitted, his breathing heavy. "But I think it was some kind of signal." "To who?" another soldier asked, his voice filled with dread. Vor didn't answer. He didn't need to. The ground began to rumble again, but this time it wasn't from the spires. From the distance, shadows began to emerge from the mist. At first, they looked like more of the glowing creatures they'd encountered earlier, but as they drew closer, their forms became clearer. These weren't the same creatures. They were larger, more imposing, with bodies that seemed to shimmer and shift like liquid metal. Their eyes glowed with the same light as the spires, and their movements were deliberate and calculated. Each step they took sent tremors through the ground. "They're not alone," Vor whispered, his heart sinking. The creatures moved in perfect unison, forming a line that seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. They stood motionless, their glowing eyes locked onto the Deathworlders. The air was thick with tension, and the soldiers could feel their courage wavering under the weight of those unblinking stares. Then, as if on some silent command, one of the larger creatures stepped forward. It raised a hand, and the ground beneath the Deathworlders began to shift. The rocks and debris around them moved as though alive, forming barriers that penned them in. "This is a warning," the creature said, its voice echoing in their minds like the first guardian. But this time, there was no pity, only cold, calculated authority. "You have trespassed on sacred ground. Leave now or face annihilation." Vor felt a surge of defiance rise within him. They were Deathworlders, survivors of the harshest conditions the galaxy had to offer. They didn't run from threats. "We're not here to destroy," he called out, his voice steady. "We came to understand this place." The creature tilted its head, as if considering his words. "Understanding does not grant you the right to claim what is not yours," it replied. "This world is under our protection, and its secrets are not for you to uncover." Before Vor could respond, another soldier spoke up. "Commander, maybe we should listen to them. This place, it's not normal. If we push too far, we don't retreat," Vor snapped, though his resolve was starting to falter. He turned back to the creature. "If you want us gone, you'll have to force us out." The creature didn't move, but the ground beneath their feet did. The trembling intensified, and the glowing spires began to emit the same eerie hum as before. The soldiers readied their weapons, but deep down, they knew they were outmatched. "You have been warned," the creature said, its voice icy and final. "The next time we meet, there will be no words." With that, the creatures began to retreat into the mist, disappearing as silently as they had appeared. The barriers surrounding the Deathworlders crumbled. The barrier flickered and then opened, creating a narrow pathway into the dome. It was an invitation, or a trap. "Your orders, sir," one of the soldiers asked, his voice tense. Vor didn't hesitate. "We go in." The group moved cautiously through the opening, their steps echoing in the vast, hollow space inside the dome. The interior was even more the trial of worth. The chamber vibrated with energy as the statues of the Guardians came to life. Their massive forms moved with an eerie grace, the glow in their eyes casting long shadows on the walls. The Deathworlders instinctively tightened their grip on their weapons, but something about the Guardian's presence made it clear. This wasn't a fight they could win through brute force. Commander Vor stood at the forefront, the glowing object still clutched in his hand. Its rhythmic pulse had synchronized with his heartbeat, as though it were alive and connected to him. He scanned the room, his mind racing to decipher the meaning behind the voice's words. "What does it mean? Prove we're worthy." Rix muttered, his eyes never leaving the advancing statues. "I think we're about to find out," Vor replied grimly. The statues halted their movement, forming a circle around the group. The air grew heavy, pressing down on their chests like an invisible weight. Then the voice spoke again, deep and commanding. "This world has endured devastation. Its people are gone, but its spirit remains. You have taken the heart of our legacy. Now show us that you understand what it means to endure." The ground beneath them shifted, and the floor split into sections, separating each Deathworlder into individual arenas. The glowing object in Vor's hand vanished, disintegrating into particles of light that floated into the air. The voice echoed one final warning. "Face the trials. Only those who understand sacrifice, unity, and strength shall prevail." Trial 1. Rix's challenge. Rix found himself in a dense forest, the air thick with humidity and the distant sound of predators echoing through the trees. He gritted his teeth, his survival instincts kicking in immediately. The low growl sounded behind him, and he turned to see a massive, shadowy beast with glowing red eyes. The beast lunged, and Rix barely managed to dodge. He rolled to his feet, his weapon ready, but something stopped him from pulling the trigger. The beast wasn't attacking again. It was circling him, as if waiting for something. "Not a normal predator," Rix muttered, narrowing his eyes. "What are you testing me for?" He realized the answer wasn't in defeating the beast, but in understanding it. Lowering his weapon, he extended a hand cautiously. The beast growled but didn't attack. Slowly, Rix stepped forward, his voice calm. "You're scared too, aren't you?" he said softly. "This isn't your home anymore, is it?" The beast hesitated, its growl fading. Then it let out a mournful howl and vanished, leaving Rix alone in the forest. A faint glow appeared ahead, guiding him back to the chamber. Trial 2. Vor's challenge. Vor stood in a barren wasteland, the wind howling around him. Ahead, he saw a group of figures, his team, lying injured and helpless. Between them and him, a field of jagged spikes jutted out of the ground, shifting and growing as though alive. "Commander," one of the figures called weakly, "help us." Without hesitation, Vor stepped onto the spikes. Pain shot through his legs, but he gritted his teeth and pressed on. Each step was agony, but he knew turning back wasn't an option. The figures weren't just his team. They were his responsibility. "Hold on," Vor shouted, his voice strained. "I'm coming." As he reached the first figure, the spikes dissolved, and the figure faded into light. One by one, Vor pushed forward, saving each figure despite the increasing pain. When he reached the last one, the wasteland disappeared, and he found himself back in the chamber. The voice spoke again. "You understand sacrifice." Trial 3. The team's unity. The rest of the team faced a shared challenge. They were trapped in a maze with no clear exit, and the walls shifted constantly. At first, panic set in, each soldier trying to find their way out alone. But the maze seemed to punish their individual efforts, separating them further. It was Rix who realized the solution. "We need to move together," he shouted. "The maze is testing our unity." Reluctantly, the team regrouped, moving as a single unit. Whenever one of them faltered, another stepped in to help. The maze's walls began to stabilize, and a glowing path appeared, leading them back to the chamber. The final test. The group reunited in the chamber, their trials complete. The statues began to glow, their eyes shining brighter than ever. The voice returned, this time with a tone of approval. You have proven yourselves. Sacrifice, unity, and understanding. The traits of those who endure. The heart of this world is yours to wield. Use it wisely. The glowing object reappeared in Vor's hands, its light now steady and warm. The statues returned to their original positions, and the chamber began to dissolve around them. Moments later, they were back on their ship, the object still in Vor's grasp. "What now, Commander?" Rix asked, his voice filled with exhaustion and respect. Vor looked at the glowing heart, its light reflecting in his eyes. "We honor their legacy. We make sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain." The ship's engines roared to life as they left the alien planet behind, but the lessons they had learned, and the power they had gained, would shape their future forever. The legacy of Deathworlders. The Deathworlders returned to the Galactic Council with the glowing artifact, their ship's hull still scared from the trials they had endured. The crew was tired but resolute, their faces marked with a mixture of exhaustion and determination. As their vessel docked, a crowd of alien diplomats and citizens gathered, their eyes filled with curiosity and apprehension. The council chamber was a grand hall, lined with shimmering banners representing countless species. At its center stood the High Speaker, a tall, insectoid being with a voice like the rustle of leaves. The murmurs of the assembly quieted as Commander Vor stepped forward, the artifact pulsing faintly in his hands. "Deathworlders," the High Speaker began, its multifaceted eyes fixed on Vor. "You ventured to the Lost World and returned. What have you brought back?" Vor raised the artifact, its light casting long, dancing shadows across the chamber. "This is the heart of a civilization that refused to surrender even in their final moments. They left behind their knowledge, their strength, and a warning. Only those who understand sacrifice, unity, and endurance can wield this power." The council members leaned forward, their expressions a mix of awe and skepticism. One alien, a serpentine being with a voice like a hiss, spoke up. "And what do you intend to do with such power, Commander? Will you use it to dominate? To conquer?" Vor's gaze hardened. "We endured the trials not for domination, but for understanding. The guardians of that world entrusted us with this legacy, and we intend to honor it. This power isn't just for Deathworlders. It's for all who choose to stand against the darkness." The chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices, some in agreement, others in doubt. The High Speaker raised a hand, silencing the room. "Commander Vor, the artifact you hold could alter the balance of the galaxy. Will you share its knowledge, or will you keep it hidden, as the Deathworlders are known to do?" Rick stepped forward, his usual smirk replaced with an uncharacteristic seriousness. "We've seen what happens when power is hoarded. Entire worlds fall. If this artifact can help protect lives, then it's worth sharing, but not without caution. We won't let it fall into the wrong hands." The High Speaker considered their words, the tension in the room palpable. Finally, it nodded. "Very well. The Council will oversee the study and distribution of this artifact's knowledge, with the Deathworlders as its guardians. This is not just your legacy. It belongs to all who dare to survive." As the assembly dispersed, Vor and his crew stood together, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced trials that tested their very humanity, and they had emerged not just as survivors, but as protectors of a legacy far greater than themselves. Epilogue. Weeks later, the artifact's knowledge began to be shared across the galaxy. New technologies emerged, alliances were strengthened, and a newfound hope spread among the species. But in the shadows, whispers of discontent grew. Not everyone was pleased with the Deathworlders' newfound role as protectors of this ancient power. In the quiet of their ship, Rix turned to Vor. "Do you think we did the right thing, Commander?" Vor stared out at the endless stars, the artifact's faint glow reflected in his eyes. "We did what we had to. But the galaxy isn't done testing us yet." The camera pans out, the ship a small light against the vast darkness, leaving the audience with a lingering sense of anticipation for what challenges lie ahead.